Transifa.
None.
No one.
You have to go to this entrance. We bought flowers for the girls. Say hi, Jesse.
Hi.
Where are we at right now?
Somewhere in Waukesha.
And what are we doing tonight?
We are going to see Chloe Cole, Luca Heim, Laura Becker, who are all detransitioners. At like an abandoned mansion.
That we're locked out of.
Right.
It is gorgeous out here today.
Maybe we go to the main entrance. They probably only open these doors for like a wedding.
So we are right off the highway. It is gorgeous today.
It's really nice.
We're trying to find our way in.
Pick a door, any door. One of 50.
It's probably over here. Oh yeah, it's probably over here because we had to go park down there.
But it's not I thought the flyer, I could have sworn the flyer said the Oak Ballroom.
It did say that. That's what I had on the...
Oak Ballroom, but they probably want you to go through the main entrance. I don't mind walking.
We finally found the door, y'all.
This is just about the time. Put that bottle
Today's events, 30. Oh, okay, 5 cocktails. Partner ethical care, parents help patrol. Picture. So now we're just going to go find where we're supposed to go. We're gonna find out where we are supposed to be.
Employees only.
Hello.
Meeting room.
I should have got a hotel here.
Maybe.
Be funny if 2 little dead girls pulled up in the front of the room right there. Shining. We got a bar. It's Wisconsin. Everybody's got a bar. Oh, right here. Thank you. It's in this room right here. No, I'm kidding.
The closet. We're in the closet.
Coming out the closet. We made it. We're here. All right, let me pause for.
And we were speaking with Christina, and we had a call. Something the same day as this year's water fountain. Do something
Hi. How you doing? A very, very intimate gathering here.
I was introduced to a belief system that, it had a lot to do with gender, but it was more like, if you don't fit in, that's a sign that you're trans. If you don't like your body, then that's a sign that you're trans. And if you transition, all these problems will be fixed. From when I was very young, around 5 years old, I felt like I was limited in what I could do in life as a girl or as a woman. I was afraid to grow up as a woman. I love to dress up. Very musical child, and I started singing when I was like 2 years old. I knew I wanted to be a singer from when I was really little. I was more of like an introverted, like indoors, bookworm, artistic type of child. It wasn't until I was 13 years old that I went to a website that was specifically for female to male people transitioning, and so that's when I learned that it was, well, in theory, possible to transition. So that was when I actually labeled the experiences that I had as gender dysphoria. I'm 28. When I was 22, I started injecting testosterone into my body so that I could medically transition from female to male. I then went on to get what they call top surgery in the business, which is a double mastectomy. Then was on testosterone for a few months after that as well, before I started to realize that I had made a mistake. I think a lifelong preoccupation and discomfort with my body that I'm afraid was, despite what I thought, just a very normal sort of young adult female issues. In the end, I felt like I had discovered the thing that would make me feel better. And then I was like, okay, I'm feeling so lost and so depressed and having these suicidal ideations. But then I realized oh, I can become a man and then I will be comfortable. And I had idealized the experience of men in society so much. I thought that I would be comfortable and, feel safe and feel just able to I guess be myself without, these expectations that I felt were on women. In this social justice ideology, there's kind of a hierarchy of who is the most oppressed versus who is the most privileged. The further along you are on the oppressed scale, that means, that your opinion is listened to more. I found myself in this place where I had found the only community of other girls who were more like me in terms of personality. I could relate to them, but it was so enmeshed in this kind of belief system that made me feel really guilty about being a cis, straight, white girl. You begin to feel a kind of pressure to constantly apologize for yourself. Okay, well, how do I not be this privileged person anymore? And one thing that's really easy to do is just change your pronouns. I first went with non-binary. I went with a demi-girl. So I just changed my pronouns to she, they. And it took a year, maybe two, to fully start saying I'm a boy. Eventually, after maybe a year and a half, 2 years, I actually fully wanted to change my body. And that's around the point where I cut my hair, and then into my senior year of high school, I told my parents that I wanted to be trans, and they didn't like that, they didn't support it. I talked to my guidance counselor, and eventually she referred me to the school psychologist, and they were both really encouraging me that I was trans, and they were kind of saying things like, we're so sorry that your parents aren't accepting you, we'll help you.
Teachers have been replaced with activists. Education is now indoctrination. And our kids are left with gaping holes in their knowledge, academics, self-awareness, and cultural understanding. Having been thoroughly infiltrated by ideas that compassion means facilitating delusions, the educational system in the United States has turned itself inside out to now believe that the job of educators is to make sure children as young as 5 know how to choose their own pronouns.
When I was in college, I was really into deconstructing gender and not just the idea of being transgender in a female to male or male to female sense, but I was really interested in deconstruct the binary. So I think when I was maybe 19 or 20, something like that, I started identifying as non-binary. I felt uncomfortable being seen as a woman. I didn't feel very comfortable socially. I was just one of these sort of intense young women who hadn't really figured out her place in the world, and I just didn't feel very comfortable with myself. Once I realized that medically transitioning was something that people like me were doing, I was oh, it all makes sense. This is why I've always been so obsessed with my body and so obsessed with managing it, and this is why I've had issues with wanting to be super skinny and restricting my eating and being preoccupied with people perceiving me in this way. It's because I just didn't have the right body.
She's moving to Arizona.
We watch their struggles through teenage years. It's not a mistake. It happens globally. It's a developmental necessity, unfortunately for girls. That means when they reach puberty, they pull away from their parents, they become insanely embarrassed, and they also want to please their peers. Can you imagine teenage girls right now? You're already embarrassed by your body, but you want to fit them with your friends. Friends are telling you is that that boy is welcome in your space and that man really is a woman.
I'm an autistic woman who was once a very lonely autistic girl with unusual interests for a girl. I loved dinosaurs and archaeology and science fiction. I was called Rain Man by my peers at church because I read a lot of books and I remembered things in them. I hated being a girl because I felt like I was forever being told I couldn't do things. I hated it when at puberty, my body started getting what I thought of at the time as lumpy, fat, and sore. Ironically, one of the things that really kind of supported my idea of being trans was that before I was trans, none of the adults in my life at school or anything really cared that much. They didn't really see that I was struggling. But then when I said I was trans, then they all wanted to like bend over backwards to help me be trans.
I graduated from college and basically had like a very deep mental health crisis. I had been sort of like going downhill and like had just had a real like failure to launch. I just hadn't really figured out anything to do with myself at that point, and I was really lost. I think when things feel out of control and you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, I think it's easy to fixate on something that is under your control. When I was transitioning, I went to a therapist. I don't think she had really deeply studied trans stuff. She was just sort of like, okay, well, it sounds good, you know, sounds like you got a good idea of what you're doing. And we did like a few sessions and I told her what I was thinking and I told her that I, was having suicidal thoughts and that I thought that this would help it. And she was like, okay. And then I stopped going to her for a while until I needed to go back and get my letter for top surgery, which I had to have. And then she did write me that.
What you hope is that this person is an expert that will be able to listen to someone and recognize, is this legitimate gender dysphoria or could there be some underlying issues? So they just kind of automatically assume that you are trans, but I've talked to numerous people who have said that their gender therapist just immediately affirmed them. Once I reached the point where I wanted to change my body to look more masculine, that's when I decided that I wanted to go on testosterone. Pretty much as soon as I turned 18, I made an appointment. I went to Planned Parenthood. It was just one appointment, took about an hour.
When I was young, I felt so different. I never fit in. Said something's wrong again.
When I was offered testosterone by the gender therapist, I was actually hesitant at that time because I knew I'd be starting college pretty soon, and I didn't have parental support. And also there was my singing voice because I knew that it would affect my singing voice even back then.
I am stardust. Yeah, I came from outer space. It was the world who told me I should change perfectly imperfect. I break the mold in every way, but now I won't forget my name. I am stardust.
So yeah, I went back into the closet for a few years. I just kind of pushed it down and ignored it. And because of that, my eating disorder flared back up again. And I also started struggling with alcohol addiction and drug addiction. And I ended up dropping out of college and not finishing. And so at that point, I called up Planned Parenthood because I'd been researching and I knew that they offered those kind of services. And I thought there would be at least some kind of process to get the hormones or, just some kind of psychological evaluation. But instead what happened is I called Planned Parenthood. They told me that a doctor would be calling me back. And when they called me back, we had about a 30-minute phone conversation. And then I was prescribed testosterone over the phone. And I went and picked it up the same day. And it was pretty clear she did not look at my chart because she would have seen some things that would have at least be cause for concern because I I had a history of suicide attempts. I've been, institutionalized before. I've been to like inpatient eating disorder treatment. The outcome of that conversation was, here's your drugs. I went back and got my medical records, which have the recorded questions and the answers that I gave back. And if you read it, it's like, I was saying stuff like, oh, I think that I'm gonna be so much happier after I transition. Like, I'm really depressed now and I'm suicidal, but everything's gonna be so much better after I transition. They said that I was a perfect candidate for testosterone, and they prescribed me the testosterone on my first visit. I went to the nurse practitioner. She gave me a small packet with, the informed consent information on it. I told her that I thought I needed a higher dose because I think I have excess estrogen because my thighs and breasts are big, which was just very I had just issues with my body. I don't know why she listened to that, but she agreed and she said, what dosage would you like? And I said, what's the highest we can go? And then she prescribed me the maximum dosage of testosterone.
The effects of testosterone was really interesting and very exciting for me at first. My breasts started shrinking. I started losing body fat and becoming leaner, which I really liked. I was growing a lot of body hair, including some on my face and just my legs and my stomach, and everything was getting hairier. I had been this weepy, sad, lost person, and then I started feeling this rush. The hormones made me feel it turned off the sadness and it made me feel stronger, and I was stronger. I got these awesome arm muscles without even trying. But I have to say there was a small underlying anxiety beneath the excitement that was a fear that I might be doing something wrong. But I was I think this is internalized transphobia. The one little red flag that I had at first was I had a nice soprano voice that I enjoyed singing in, and I started to lose it, and that was the one moment that was really sad at first. And I remember talking to my mom I'm the Little Mermaid, I have to give up my voice to become a real person. And she was that's really sad. I was yeah, it is sad, but at the time, I was it's a sacrifice I need to make. I felt I was on the right path because I think when you think of yourself as trans, you think, well, you'll just know because it'll feel right. And what I was doing felt right because I had been so lost before. I began to get a lot of hope. I'm gonna look more male, I'll start to pass, I'll feel better, I'll get surgery, I'll feel better, and when I am in a body that fits me better, then I'll be able to function better. I dressed masculine, I changed my name. I did sort of a androgynous name, and then once I passed as a man, then I would change my name to something fully masculine and sort of integrate into society as a man. But as it turns out, I never got to that step because after getting into transition to the point where I had surgery, things took a dramatic turn for the worse.
When I first started testosterone, I felt like it was a miracle cure for all of my problems because I did actually feel a lot better. I felt like my depression and mood instability went away pretty much immediately. When you start testosterone, your cycle stops and you just become a lot more even a lot of the time. So it did kind of feel one of the better antidepressants that I'd ever taken in my life. I did notice myself feeling more agitated sometimes. When I was feeling emotional, it was less likely to be sadness and it was more likely to be irritation or anger.
Leading up to surgery, I had an enormous amount of anxiety about it, but I also was obsessively ruminating over it, and I was looking at trans influencers who had the body that I wanted and reading all of that stuff, the happy testimonials Also, feeling the hysteria of the online trans community, which was
Good
really
word.
freaking out because Donald Trump was president and they were like, oh, it's gonna be made illegal to transition. Like, it felt like there was a little bit of time pressure. Like, most of my friends and stuff were like, yes, you're ready, like, you can do it. I decided it was the best thing for me to do. I had my surgery when I was 23, and I had expected that it would be making me feel less depressed and making me feel, like I had a purpose and going forward. That had made me think I was on the right path because I was like, this is what's happening. I'm becoming my true self. I'm feeling better. And I thought that the top surgery would be a very large step in that direction. Like, I would feel much better. And it was for a very short amount of time.
I feel like my songwriting and my experience of my creativity was affected by the testosterone as well. At first it felt good that I just wasn't emotional anymore, at least not like to the point of crying. But then I realized that it was almost like this part of myself that was just shut off and I couldn't access it. After around 3 months, the worst of the side effects really started to surface. At this point, it was summer going into fall, so it was very hot outside, and I just remember being in public wearing a binder, and I'd start to have heart palpitations, and I would just panic because I didn't know what I should do. Like, I felt like I had to take my binder off, but then I was like in public, and then there's like the whole bathroom situation, so it was like I didn't want to go to like the women's bathroom. Then I didn't really feel safe going in the men's either. I still wasn't ready to quit. I was like, no, I know this like bright future as a man is ahead of me. Like, I know this is the right choice.
After a few weeks of taking the testosterone, I started to notice that I was a lot more irritable than before. I just felt like this kind of like sensitive, irritable person. And then obviously, like with the sex drive, anything remotely sexual would just like overwhelm me, and that made me feel really out of control. Both that and the anger aspect just made me feel like I was kind of like possessed by something and I wasn't myself anymore. Any emotion would just turn into extreme rage. Like, when I would get angry, I felt like hurting people or breaking something, and so the only way I knew to like control that was to hurt myself. I just couldn't control myself. I was completely out of control. Eventually, that got so bad that I ended up hurting myself badly enough that I went to the emergency room and they said that I should be checked into the psychiatric unit. And so I stayed there for about a week. They just diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder and psychosis, and prescribed me 4 different medications. I ended up having to go back to the hospital after a few weeks, and I just really, like, my life just became like a total disaster. I wasn't functioning at all. I wasn't holding down a job. I wasn't going to school. I just felt like a monster. Once I stopped the testosterone, these symptoms all went away and I started feeling like myself again. I was on testosterone for a total of 17 months, and the entire time I was on it, none of the symptoms I was having were ever connected to the testosterone by any professional that I was seeing.
I was looking into scheduling top surgery, which is a double mastectomy, and I had obtained a permission letter from Planned Parenthood. I just called, and this time they transferred me to another clinic where I talked to a different doctor who I'd never met in person. I think I talked to her for maybe about 45 minutes this time, and she wrote me a letter for top surgery without ever meeting me in person. My surgeon said that the insurance wouldn't cover it if I didn't have a letter.
So I had the surgery. I was incredibly weak, and like I had painkillers, and it was like this really intense experience, obviously. And then right after the surgery, I had been hit with these like awful feelings of having made like a huge mistake, like undeniable, just like, oh no, like what have I done? I was like looking down at my body and seeing like these like weeping gashes on my chest and just having like the most awful feeling. And then of course I went online and was like, has anyone else felt this? And a lot of trans people had said that they also experienced like intense, even like suicidal despair after surgery, and then they got over it and felt better about it. So I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't a mistake, but there was a real seed of doubt planted at that point. After that, what made me diverge from like the other trans people was I started to really like dig into other trans like narratives and dig into people who had, you know, gone all the way and gotten phalloplasty. And I remember I came across this blog that echoed something that I was myself feeling, which was, you know, I was like, all right, I got a flat chest, like I look good on top. And then I was like, my hips are still wide, like I don't know what to do about this. I can't get like hip removal surgery, like for the bones. And then I was like, what am I gonna do? I was thinking about that and realizing like, I don't really feel better. And I found this trans man's blog where he had said like, I had just started out wanting to masculinize my face with testosterone, but once that happened, then I wanted a flat chest, and once that happened, then I needed like phalloplasty. And basically he was saying that what had started out as like just wanting a small amount of masculinization had then actually made him more dysphoric about all the different parts of his body. And I was like, oh no, like this is never over, like this will never be over for me. And I just was realizing that there might not be a light at the end of the tunnel like I thought there was. I also don't really feel like a man, I just feel like a woman who has had her breasts cut off. So I decided to just stop testosterone after the doubts continued to grow. Maybe I just am non-binary. Maybe I'm not a trans man, maybe I'm non-binary. I was like a little step back, and then I was like, okay, maybe I do want to go back to being called Grace. Like maybe that would be a good like self-acceptance step. I was like, maybe that whole framework I had been looking at my problems through was an artificial framework, and you know, maybe none of it was necessary. Like maybe I was just looking at it all wrong. It became important for me to accept myself, like as myself, like not as identifying as anything, but just being like, yeah, I'm female. Like I did everything I could to delete that fact from myself, but it's like I just am myself.
Every year we don't stop this. How many hundreds or thousands of young girls like me, like some of you, all the other girls who hate their bodies getting lumpy and sore, how many of them are going to weep at the chance to have their newly lumpy chests flattened out again by mastectomies before they stop being sore? How many of them are going to weep at the chance to have their annoying periods magicked away by hysterectomy without realizing what it means to go on menopause in your teens and the huge impact that has on cardiovascular health? It can take decades off your life to go into early menopause.
When I just realized how detrimental the changes to my voice had been and how devastated I was that I had made irreversible changes to myself, I just decided to hold off. So I canceled the top surgery, and I also canceled my legal name change.
I never ended up doing any surgeries, and I think that's because once I started the testosterone, I just became so dysfunctional that I wasn't really able to have the mental wherewithal to go through the process of calling surgeons, dealing with insurance.
It was a big like intellectual paradigm shift for me. I was like a young person, angsty, didn't understand her place in the world, and I just needed to like grow up and figure out how to just exist as an adult and not be so preoccupied with how other people perceive me.
We are in a culture that treats impulses toward family and marriage as backwards and pushes children into sex and sexual lifestyles without any consideration of love, commitment, or reproductive responsibility. In many ways, the rites of passage that used to exist in our culture, whether they were religious, like bar mitzvahs or confirmations, or even cultural ones like Sweet 16 or Quinceanera, wherein children would be ushered into adulthood in their communities, it's no coincidence that the youngest age most surgeons will operate on for breast removal or prescribe cross-sex hormones is 12 or 13 years old. This is the pivotal moment in which a child seriously begins the move from childhood to adulthood.
I got out of the hospital the second time, and I was just thinking to myself, like, man, like, what the hell has my life become? This is not what I thought it was going to be, because before I transitioned, I had it in my head that, like, oh, I was just gonna, like, blossom into, like, finally being my authentic self. Like, the reason that I'm so unhappy is because I'm not really supposed to be a girl. And once I can be a boy, then finally, like, my confidence is gonna come out. I'm gonna like how I look. I'm gonna feel confident around people. And that just never happened. I just became really dysfunctional. And then someone close to me made a video montage of pictures of us. And it was like chronological order from when we met, which was only a few days after I started the testosterone, up until a very recent picture. And as I was watching this video, I like watched myself transform from like a young teenager to just like this really unhappy looking person, and honestly like unwell looking person. It just finally hit me that like, oh my god, like this has all been a mistake, everything.
I thought it was the only way to heal my gender dysphoria. I thought it was the only effective treatment. But then at like the 3.5 month mark, I had done a shot of testosterone, and I think it was a day or two later, I was trying to sing, and my voice had been sort of gradually getting deeper, but just somehow that last shot just sort of sent it over the edge, and there was just this like dramatic drop in my voice that happened all at once. And suddenly I just opened my mouth to sing and nothing was coming out. It was just air and squeaks. I struggled to attend social events or anywhere where I had to project my voice. I had to stop performing live because it was just so uncomfortable. And that just kind of brought me to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done to myself? So I just went off of everything cold turkey. It was a series of events that caused me to question the gender ideology. The first being just how badly testosterone had affected my health, and just finding out that there is a serious lack of quality data on this fact that medical transition is supposedly this proven thing that helps gender dysphoria and helps mental health in the long term, and that you know, detransitioners are rare, and just all these things that they say. I started looking into a lot of studies, and what I found is that there actually isn't much quality evidence supporting medical transition as the best treatment. I started to grow concerned with, you know, scientific and medical misinformation being spread by the trans community.
I realized that like, oh, okay, there's a lot of people going through this. Like, it's not just a handful of people. It's like hundreds and thousands of people going through this. And so once I started meeting these people, I just started having conversations. I found out that there's a lot of really interesting and smart people getting involved in this. And so I just became really passionate about understanding what's going on. It wasn't enough for me to just like detransition and get on with my life. I really wanted to understand what happened to me, and I wanted to understand what was going on in the world, because there's just so many people getting caught up in this.
There's just the larger piece of like ideologically, you know, and the idea that we should define a woman based on, you know, what's in a person's head. A woman is a feeling in a person's head rather than, you know, the biological reality of being an adult human female. And that just kind of got me thinking of like who you believe you are in your head. Like, does that really trump biology? And it was around that time that I went on YouTube and I just searched trans women aren't women, because I had never ever listened to gender critical people or TERFs, because I was just told they were hateful people. So one of the videos that popped up was Posey Parker's trigonometry interview. I watched her interview and I honestly credit her with piquing me and just getting me to wake up and break out of the gender ideology, because she just brought up so many examples of how women are being endangered by this movement. A woman is an adult human female, and as an adult human female, the sky is the limit. You can do anything you want to do in your female body. You can be whoever you want to be. Same goes for, little boys and men. You can be whoever you want in the body that you have. You don't have to change yourself to be yourself. Now I really feel happier and healthier than I have in a very long time, maybe forever.
These days I'm doing pretty well, I think. It's been really important for me to move on and build a life. And it's been so empowering to talk to other detransitioners and do my writing about my story. I wanted people to know that there is life after detransition, even if you've made serious physical changes, because humans are very resilient. Humans survive all kinds of things, and I had to just understand that I, may have made some serious mistakes, but you can always rebuild your life. I'm really worried about other people who are getting sucked into, thinking that gender transition is the answer to problems that would be better solved elsewhere. I am hopeful, but I think it's going to be a really ugly time. I think a lot of people are honestly going to be hurt, and I think the fallout is going to be really severe from all the detransitioners. So I'm a little worried about that. But our voices can no longer be denied, so that's good.
We thought less of the feminine tasks, and we looked down upon ourselves for not having male characteristics. This we have passed on to our girl children, who, when they make that fateful realization that they are no longer the child they were, decide fully that they don't want to be the woman they will become either. We do our girls a disservice when we lie to them and tell them they don't have to be women. We harm them when we usher them into a world of adult sexuality with no reproductive consequences, without love, and in the case of genital mutilation surgery, one that even lacks the potential for sexual pleasure. We tell them they can be anything they want to be, but we have forgotten to tell them to love being who they are.
My singing voice has never returned fully. My voice is still lower than it used to be. I'm concerned that the testosterone may have affected my fertility and potentially will cause me some infertility issues, but I really don't know. So that's something that I'll have to find out in the future. And that I think more than anything else, regret over that, because I just hadn't been thinking about having children at that time. I didn't think I really wanted them, and that's something that I began to really want in my mid-20s. So that is something that I feel very worried about. I feel really unhappy with how I look without breasts, but I also am not sure about reconstructive surgery. Any surgery is risky. So far, it's been impossible to get it covered by insurance when I've asked, but I am worried about the repercussions of having silicone implants, so I'm still undecided about reconstruction. I've been enormously lucky with my relationship with my husband. He was with me through the whole thing. He wasn't happy that I was transitioning, but he loved me, and he wanted me to be happy, so he was willing to support me through it. And then he really, more than anyone else, really saved me during my detransition, because everything just fell apart for me then.
When it comes to children, and I'm going to really plow through this, so I always cry. When it comes to parents who have witnessed their children getting sucked into this cult, and their teachers, and the doctors, and the counsellors pull those children in, for what reason, I have no idea. I don't know what they get from it, but I don't believe it's anything but evil. When I watch the parents' grief, and it's palpable. I literally just feel my heart ache when they have to witness their children disappearing. They have to witness, they have to live through the grief of watching a child that they know, that they love, that they adore, become someone that they no longer really recognize. And the doctors just allow it, take it, celebrate it, go on TikTok, sell it. These are some of the things that are not yours to give away. Women, mother, mum, girl, girls, daughter. These are not your words to give away. These mean something to each and every one of us. Those of us privileged enough to have daughters. So, to those people, the peddlers of transgender ideology, those words are not yours to give away.